All right, everyone, welcome to the third episode of Behind the Fox. Today we have a very special guest, a guy who is integral to the development of the commercial side of St. Charles and the Fox Valley, Ryan Corcoran. Ryan is the principal at Corcoran Commercial Real Estate. He owns a property management company. Ryan also is a developer and investor in real estate, and he also, believe it or not, has some product development, some inventions behind his name. When Ryan is not engaged in commercial aspects of real estate, he enjoys helping the community through organizations like Casa Kane County. Ryan is also a pretty good golfer, a little better than me, and has a great swing. We might get into a little bit of that today. But first off, without further ado, welcome to Ryan Corcoran. Ryan, how you doing today, bud?
Great. Thanks for having me. First-time podcaster. Big fan of you guys. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is interesting. Little nervous, but it's fun. You know, who talks about themselves exclusively, but yeah, excited.
I do a pretty good job of talking about myself, but we're going to try to talk about you a little bit more today, okay?
Yeah.
Sounds good. So just for our listeners, what we're going to get into today, we're going to talk about Ryan and his business, kind of how it all happened for him. We're going to talk about his involvement in the development of St. Charles, particularly First Street. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what's coming next to St. Charles, what might be on the horizon, right, Katie?
So exciting. We can't wait to hear from an insider on all the great stuff that we have coming ahead for us.
Sure.
And as I said, this is our third episode, so Katie and I are kind of new to this too. One of the things I was throwing around, Katie, is that this is video, is also, audio. So like, do we call the people watching like viewers or listeners? So I just decided I'm going to start calling them our people.
Oh, I like that.
Our people, right? So I think our people are going to get a lot out of this segment. Ryan, first, like I said, I want to get into a little bit of your background. So, I mean, everyone knows, or everyone should know, your office is there on Route 31 in St. Charles, Corcoran Commercial Real Estate. You also operate a property management company out of that building, correct?
Correct.
A lot of other things. I want to go back and start at the beginning, like what Ryan Corcoran was doing right out of college.
Well, I was taking the LSATs, similar to the both of you, and at the same time working a sales job. And where that led to was a couple of local, let's just say, people in the area, investors, developers, that had a project that was going to get started. So there was 7 acres between Ford and Toyota here in St. Charles, and they wanted to turn that into a self-storage business. So they're like, well, we don't have any time to run this. We don't have it's just a little too much to handle business operations as well as do this development. So they all decided doing self-storage, they didn't know what to do. So we all took a trip to Las Vegas. And
everyone thinks self-storage in Vegas.
Yeah, let's go learn about something in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So met all the vendors, did, the steel, the doors, the security, how it works. And I'm at the time, 24-year-old kid, just along for the ride, like, wow, this is great. So these guys got together, figured it out. They put the landowners, which was Warwick Publishing, together with some of the developers, Bob Rasmussen and some others, and developed 85,000 square feet of self-storage, which, looking back on this, was a lot of square footage for self-storage right off the bat, right? But we're like, oh, this is going to get rented up day one. Anyway, as a 24-year-old, I went out there, learned about it. We did the development, went through permitting, built the buildings, and then started operating the business, right? So one of our first clients, interestingly enough, was a big company here in St. Charles, ALE Solutions, which locally everybody got to know because there were so many people that worked for them eventually. But at first, they were working out of the self-storage business. So it was great. It was a good way to get into how to operate a company, run books, sell or rent units, deal with problems, manage the property, that kind of thing. So that was my start into the St. Charles area beyond growing up here.
So you grew up in the area, correct?
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you started in Elburn and your family, or lived in St. Charles, moved to Elburn, is that right?
Opposite. So yeah, we lived in Elburn, went to Caneland, grade school, middle school, freshman year of high school. And at the time, there's no new homes or, anything like that. The community was somewhat older, right? There was no young families coming in. And the school district was struggling to put money together to fund everything, including sports. So when the tax referendum went through and they said no, which is typical that you come to learn now, but they were going to cut sports. So we're like, well, let's maybe move a little closer to work. My parents worked out of Bloomingdale, and so we moved to St. Charles. Went from 150 kids in a class to 1,000, almost 1,000 students. So I went from playing every sport to really you just had to pick one and barely make that because the competition was big. It was all one high school at the time.
So, and what your dad actually had a business in computers, is that right?
Yeah.
And what was that about?
So my mom and dad and Uncle Chuck, who was college buddies with my dad, they started a computer company back in the late 70s, which was good timing. And they sold, actually my dad sold diskettes for Memorex. And quickly they didn't sell to small to medium-sized business. And so he formed this company and sold to Chuck and my mom, and they did really well. Well, it transitioned into him working for that company, our company, full time, and selling computers, peripherals, services, and so they grew a computer company at just the right time.
And you came out of college. You actually first worked there, right?
I did. I worked there my whole life. So warehouse, packing. We put together computers for State Farm. Customer service, helped payroll with mom, sales. Yeah. So we kind of floated all over wherever we could internship wise. And so, yeah, worked there throughout, and they got out of the business and sold the company right about the same time that I was getting into business and graduated from college.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the LSAT. I don't think we've ever talked about that before. So you had some thoughts of trying the law as a profession.
We did. I did. Yeah.
What was the driving force there? What was your thought process?
Well, it was just to become a professional in some capacity. I mean, I went to Drake University. Sarah and I both went, my wife and I both went to Drake, met there. I did marketing and information systems, but graduated in 2002, so right after 9/11. And, at the time, jobs crashed, right? I could have got a job doing IT out of school and done really well, but everything kind of went away, right? So I thought, well, this would be a great, avenue to continue my education, become a professional, and go become an attorney. So
What kind of law would you have practiced? What were you thinking?
didn't know at the time transactional is just because I was marketing, information systems, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Did you have any attorneys in the family, anyone that you had connected with, or was it just kind of like, okay, this is the next logical step maybe?
Uncle Mike Sullivan was a judge out of McHenry County. So he was an attorney. Outside of that, not really.
All right.
Yeah.
I think you probably made the right move because you're doing pretty well now.
You know what? I deal with an attorney a couple times a day, so it feels like I still am doing that.
All right, let's go
And all
ahead.
the things that you learn and that right? And just the idea that you get to apply, all of this knowledge base in your profession,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of a great pivot into that.
Yeah. It's fun in the sense that, you get to, in commercial real estate especially, and managing commercial properties, you get to deal with every variety of business that there is. And being this far out west, our firm doesn't just do industrial real estate. We don't just do office space or retail. We manage all three product types, and as well as mixed use. But it kind of gets us all over the board in terms of knowledge base. So, master of none, but pretty good in all three.
Well, now our people, you should know Ryan's being modest. I think he's probably a master of most of them, but nevertheless. So, I also want to bring this up. So Ryan and I share a couple things in common. We're going to talk more about this later. But Ryan's business is he involves all of his family in his business. So his wife works with him, his brother-in-law, his sister, his parents, all that kind of stuff. And he also has the good fortune of being very lucky and fortunate to marry above himself. So Sarah is a wonderful person, and he does not deserve her. But nevertheless,
But he's smart enough to appreciate it.
I sure do.
there you go. So you said something interesting, and I was wondering how the genesis of this came about. So you came in out of college. You decide not to go to law school. You get into some sales, some business ventures. What were some of the first sales jobs you had before the storage business?
Well, I tried to find businesses that I had interest in, and at the time, outdoor activities. So worked at a marina. That was more during college. After college, snowmobile parts. It was a parts business, and so we sold snowmobile parts, ATV parts, and all over the place. Then also worked at the computer company doing sales for a couple years there too.
So those early sales jobs, I want to ask you a couple questions about those. What's the best thing you learned about sales in those two early jobs? Both, well, the three really, the marina, the snowmobile parts place, and then your father's business. What's the best thing you learned about sales at that time?
Customer is always right, no matter what. Even if they're wrong, they're always right. We would travel, we were for the computer business, we were traveling, and I was trying to set up meetings with big companies, Bear Stearns out of New York, if it was, or whomever, and we're trying to sell them complete solutions to their corporate infrastructure. And so dealing with all the customers and what they want and what they know, you can't tell them what they want. You just have to kind of go with what their desires are, right? So anything to do with dealing with customers or clients, they're always right. And, the word no should not really come out of your mouth.
So kind of like a marriage, right?
It's exactly right. Yes, Josh.
See, you're showing us your skills right here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, and the problem solving, right? There's a way to give the customer what they need that they might not realize it while telling them, yes, I can do this for you. And I think that's one of your greatest skills that I noticed in working with you. And I think that you've done a really good job of applying that in multiple areas, which is, I think, a great key to your success.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Now, full disclosure to our people, we have used Ryan's services. He's spectacular. He helped place Feagans Law Group in our current spot above Beryl and Rye on 3rd Street in Geneva, and he was spectacular in the process, just spectacular. I've also worked with Ryan on a legal side with clients who are, getting into spaces, whether they're leasing them or selling them or what have you. He does a great job all the way around. So you're going to hear us devote a lot of praise on Ryan, but it's deservedly so.
Well, and not only our current space, but our space before this, when we were on the river in St. Charles, you helped us define that one and navigate, Josh and me figuring out who goes where in that space. Right. And then the new space.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back to those first three sales jobs, we talked about the best thing you learned from those jobs. What's the one thing that you disliked most about those three sales positions? Either the process, the people, like what was like, I'm not going to have this be part of my life long term. I'm going to do it differently.
Right. Well, I can tell you that in the self-storage business, and we're trying to sell units, rent out units, nobody likes to move, right? Moving their household, death of a family member, we've got all their stuff. Where do we put it? And that process is stressful. And so people walk into the store. This is before you could rent storage units online or anything like that. But, they'd walk into the store and they were bent out of shape. And so you're kind of trying to solve a problem for everybody there. That was difficult. It's definitely something that, you'd like to steer clear of that, but really you can't. You kind of have to face these problems head on. and provide a solution that works for them. Now, nobody wants to pay for self-storage. I mean, it's just extra stuff. And at the end of the day, when the true sales for self-storage was, you should throw it away. You should throw it all away, and then you don't have to pay like a monthly rate for storing this stuff. And at that point, you could see in everybody's eyes that, well, I do have to keep this, so this does have to happen, and then it would move forward.
That's excellent. So how quickly did you realize that the alternative, guys, is you have to throw the stuff away. You have to give up your stuff, which is really hard.
Right, right. You know what? Within a year or so, it was less about, hey, we're selling you, catch up. I mean, it was just more, do you really need this? And establishing if that need was there, right? And then on the other side of that, then, okay, well, what are we doing to actually attract people? And then it came down to marketing. And so I'd say in the self-storage business, more than anything, we got to understand what marketing was locally, right? So, advertising in St. John Newman's, bulletin, right? Or the chamber, using the chamber and trying to tell everybody, hey, there's a self-storage business here. At the end of it, your best form of marketing is absolutely just being customer facing. So any street signage that you got vehicles per day, right? So Route 64 having 30 to 40,000 cars, whatever given day that might be. There's a sign on the street that just says self-storage. So it's very simple in terms of, you just got to get your name in front of people.
So it's interesting. We've talked a lot about the best ways to market in the Fox Valley, and it's an interesting dynamic, I think, because professionals, and I think you might view this, we talk more about this maybe from a commercial real estate standpoint. Professionals, I think, get the best marketing bang for their buck from branding themselves, networking within the community, getting referrals from the community, as opposed to signage or internet ads or newspaper ads. Would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on that?
I would agree. I think there's some assumptions when you have a million signs out there in front of in front of buildings and for instance, my partner Ryan Samuelson and I's firm, Corcoran Commercial Real Estate, has been in front of people for 20 years. And so, if you lived here for 20 years, you're seeing a lot of signs in the Fox Valley area, anywhere from Elgin down to Aurora, and then outside of that. But, they see signage, they recognize it, and that helps. But on the other end of that, we're offering professional services, and we have to be good at what we do. A lot of times people will call around and ask, and it's the referrals that are truly where it matters most. That's when the trust comes in. Hey, they've done this, they've done this development, they've worked this transaction, they were good to work with, they were attentive, they responded, that kind of thing.
So how did that transition happen into, from the self-storage into, where you are today? What was the big change there?
Well, it was interesting. We'll talk a little bit about First Street, but, I was not an owner in First Street. I wasn't originally part of it. I was just ancillary, and some of the investors in the self-storage business, developers in the self-storage business, they were doing other projects, right? Whether that's Leroy Oaks, Tyler and 64, or First Street, and all these things were in the works at the time. So early mid-2000s, they're working on these projects. They're getting it started, with the city, with different things, and they just know here's a younger professional that's running a self-storage business. It's not magic. Yes, he's running a business, but there's more capacity there. So as these projects came online, they needed somebody to manage it and then ultimately start doing the transactions. So right after that, I got my real estate license. They started to ask me to manage the properties, and then started placing tenants, whether that was for office buildings or retail. And I was working for a local firm for 2 years, still managing the self-storage business, just not there day to day. And it was just the kind of that knowledge of, hey, he runs this business, he can run this. And so that's how that transition worked.
And he doesn't say no.
Right, right, right. It feels so good to say yes.
Well, we joke about that, but from a professional development standpoint, I can trace most of my success to just be willing to say yes to something, right?
Right.
As a young attorney, a lot of these cases came in the door, and one of my early mentors said, if it comes in the door, you find a way to do it. But some of these things that would come in the door were way out of our area of expertise, whether it be like, I was doing insurance defense, defending construction companies, and they would bring a CERCLA environmental cleanup in the door. Who's going to do that? Oh, Josh will. Sure, yeah, why not? And so on and so on. So, I think there's two commonalities there from what I can see or from what we're discussing, and that is you were willing to say yes, and someone recognized your ability, right?
Right.
They hitched their wagon to your talent.
Yeah. You've got ahead enough to wrap your own head around it and just baby this project all the way through. Admit where you're not, the most knowledgeable, but as time progresses and these things go forward successfully, you get to know and be good at what you do.
There's also an interesting dichotomy there, a little interesting nuance, because I think when we're young, we do recognize what we don't do well, or we don't know, and we look for it. But after a couple bouts of success, you also become a little numb to the concept of failure, don't you?
You do.
Not that you haven't failed at all and you haven't learned from it, but after so many successes, you're just like, you know what? I recognize the risk, but if it happens, I'll fix it.
Right. For us, that comes into play quite a bit when you're dealing with local businesses that are doing, especially in the retail sector, that are doing startups, right? Whatever that might be, a coffee shop, a bookstore, what have you. And there can come a time, and that's the heartbreaking part of this, is there can come a time when they're just like, I can't pay rent. And from our standpoint, we can put them in, we can get the best foot forward in terms of putting these businesses in, but some of them are going to fail. And you just kind of have to, we've come to learn how to deal with it, how to prepare the landlord for that, right? Because now they're missing in cash flow. They have debts to pay. And so we've gotten good at really just turning that around, easing the transition for everybody, including the tenant that might have lost their business or stopped. But it's tough. It's difficult to see that happen. Those failures, even though that's somebody else's business, it's also our failures, right? We put that business in place, gave it a shot, but it didn't work.
Well, and it's interesting to think of you being sort of the middleman then, really, truly, between the business owners who are starting and they have all this hope and all of this, and then you have the owners, and you're working to have both of them be happy, and that doesn't necessarily match.
Right. There can be people, there can be tenants and businesses that just walk and you never talk to them again. There are types of businesses that will give it their best efforts. It's all over the board.
I did a lot of commercial leasing, Ryan and I even worked together from a time period doing some commercial leasing before we transitioned mostly to injury law. I always remember counseling my clients, whether it was a tenant or a landlord, like, you need to look at this as a partnership, right?
Right.
You got to help each other out a little bit. You got to give to get from time to time. But to your point, at some point in time, it's not going to work in many instances.
Right. It is so very easy for landlords to say, this is the letter of the lease, right? This is what you're contracted for. Even if, this is what you're personally guaranteed against, you have to follow what this is. There are times, though, that there needs to be some bend to make this happen and make this work. And I think the most successful building owners and property owners are those that understand that. They want to follow what is in place, but they also understand the need to be flexible.
You said something, and I think our people would be interested to learn about this. I think maybe there might not be an understanding of how landlords own their buildings or how the buildings are financed, right? Could you explain a little bit how buildings get financed and how one building might lead to other buildings from a finance perspective?
Yeah. we will work with quite a few owners and and banks in succession. But typically, if you're financing a property, and we've gone through different versions of this as our Great Recession, the financial crisis in 08, 09 hit, we really got educated there. So that has changed to a certain degree throughout our history. But ultimately, if you're going to buy a property, it's, you can look at the big banks, you can look at the small banks, the local banks. They tend to be a little easier to work with because they can understand the product a little bit better. But, you're looking at the value of the property. The bank needs a certain loan to value, so they're requiring a certain percentage down in terms of this financing and cash and capital invested. So a lot of it comes down to net worth of the borrower so that the bank has comfort that this property will run even if there's no cash flow. Ultimately, the goal is cash flow and value creation. And, as that moves on, and you referenced building this into more properties, I think ultimately anybody that buys property needs to buy it right, which is difficult to do. Everybody wants to sell their property at or above market, and it's difficult to buy a property below market so that you can create the value, move to the next one, do the next project, have the cash to do that. It takes time. It's the transactions that we're talking about are on a much bigger time scale.
So you mentioned a couple things there I want to dig into and give our people some insight to. Would you agree that most commercial properties are financed?
Yes. Yeah, I would say 95% or more. And if you're a building owner that has owned for a long period of time, there are instances where you do own this debt free. But I want to say most everybody's leveraged in some capacity.
And then you mentioned that banks will look for a certain amount of money down, and that differs from like residential financing, correct?
It does. Let's just talk about the evolution of that. So that self-storage business that we started, the investors that guaranteed the loan for that 85,000 square feet, it was done locally with a bank that it was a private bank here out of St. Charles. At the time, this was 2002, 2003, that was 100% financed, no money down, right? But that was just a time period, and everything was booming. The economy was going nuts. The guarantees looked great, so they loaned 100% of those proceeds to build 85,000 square feet. It was a big interest burn at the beginning, but ultimately it worked out great. Worked out great for the bank. Worked out great for the investors. But that's changed, right? So that then became 25% down was the standard. Now 30% is now somewhat of the standard. 35 for commercial properties. It really all depends on covering the debt ratio versus what your income is. From a residential standpoint, I have less experience in terms of what you can buy houses for, and using debt in that regard.
When they're talking about value in a commercial property, there are a couple of different ways to value the property, right?
Right.
So one is, what's the value of this building? What is the foundation, walls, roof, interior? What is that worth from a replacement standpoint or a market standpoint, right?
Right.
The other is what?
Income valuation. So you've got cost basis, which is what you were talking about. What's it cost to build it? Income valuation comes down to what is the current income or pro forma potential income after expenses on the property. And the way that we look at this is through cap rates, so capitalization rate, and it's a standard of how much income that property has and has the ability to pay debt, right? So income standpoint, and then you got a sales comparison approach. So similar office buildings to what we're sitting in right now, what have other office buildings in the area sold for that are of similar age, quality, make, that type of thing. So when you're assessing value, you're looking at all three of those.
You mentioned earlier on back in like when you were doing the self-storage that banks would loan zero or very low down payment amounts, right?
Right.
And that was dependent on what the guarantees look like. Explain what you mean by what the guarantees look like.
So there's different ways to guarantee a loan, and typically it comes down to the bank looks at the individuals that are taking out the loan, and those loans personally guaranteed against what you have financially. That can be, what assets do you own? Homes, cash, investments, money market, CDs, whatever that might be. And that's what they look at. So they look at the creditworthiness of each individual, and that guarantee ultimately is what drives these banks to be able to make these loans beyond the collateral of the property that you're buying.
I think it would be really helpful if you would kind of explain to somebody who's thinking about starting a business and they know that they need to have a space. What are the things that they need to be thinking to put together when they want to come and talk to you? They're going to have to be the understanding about how they're going to be working with the landlord. They're going to be having to understand how build outs work and how, those pieces all go together. Could you give us an explanation of that?
Sure. So let's just say for leasing, you're going to lease a space and you're going to put it together. You're going to have a period of time that you're going to sign up for this lease, and before they come to us, they need to understand what their business plan is, projected income, projected expenses, and then ultimately fit what that overhead, that rent number is within what they're projecting for that business plan. So, and it just depends on the space that you're going to go into. So if it's office space, sometimes there's changes, or retail space, there's changes to the space that need to happen in order to get in there and operate your business. And I can tell you that build out has just become more and more expensive, right? So having an understanding of how much it's going to cost to change a space is really beneficial. So, and it's hard to do because it's construction, right? Not everybody knows what construction costs, might be, and it absolutely blows people's minds what it is today to change it. And so it all depends on the property, but typically, there'll be some sort of combination of monetary input from either the building owner and the tenant. And there are some building owners that just have the space, that's it, plug and play, that's all that we need. But in most instances, there's got to be a little bit of play there. So whether that's free rent, the tenant makes the changes, whether that's tenant improvement allowance, where the landlord is reimbursing the tenant for the cost or some of the costs of building the space and changing into what is needed. That's kind of where we come in to help them understand where this might land and costs and that type of thing.
And then I think another really important part to that is the understanding of when things need to be fixed in the space, who's responsible for it. And I was surprised about that when we opened up and all of a sudden we realized, well, we have to pay, but we have to pay for this, or no, the landlord's going to cover that. And those things don't really follow, I think, residential norms from my experience.
Right. I would think in, apartments and residences, the owner of the building is handling a little bit more of the nuts and bolts within the space. So if a sink, faucet goes bad, shower head, water heater, that type of thing, the landlord's typically taking charge there. In commercial, once your space is completed, you've got occupancy, what typically happens is what's in the space, light bulbs, your faucet, your front door that you use and your customers use every day, those end up being your ongoing maintenance expenses. Excuse me. Then from the landlord side of things, it's roof, property maintenance, cleanup, snow removal, salt, landscape. I mean, It's kind of the envelope around this space, but once you're in, that space becomes yours and your responsibility.
And you and I have had these conversations as well. You mentioned snow and ice, right? So from an injury law perspective, if someone goes into a commercial space and they slip on poorly removed snow that is refroze into ice or this, that, and the other, as an injury attorney, I'm probably going to sue the landlord and the tenant, right? But it's really usually one person's job under the lease. It's usually the landlord's job, but it could be also the tenant's responsibility. And sometimes tenants take some responsibility for it as well. Sometimes, like in downtown Geneva, the public sidewalks are cleared by the city, right? So, but again, you're not going to sue the city if there's ice on the sidewalk. You're going to sue the building owner and the tenant. So these are all like critical things that you need someone like you or an attorney as well to review in their lease and to understand when you're going into lease a space.
Right. What it says in the lease, who's responsible to do what? Does it say that you have to provide salt and ice clearing? These all matter. The contract that you have with your snow vendor for removal and care, as well as properly covered insurance. So does the vendor have insurance? Does the landlord have the right insurance? And is that covered for when, and it is a matter of when, that slip and fall happens? Because when it snows at 6:30 a.m. and people are arriving to the office at 6:45, 7 o'clock, it's impossible to expect the snow vendor to get there in between to remove that snow and ice that just formed, right?
I can't agree with that statement. It might be used against me in court of law, but I understand what you're saying, though. And taking another step, when from a tenant's standpoint, or even when you're working as a property manager for a landlord, what's the biggest surprise a tenant might have in their lease that they have to replace or repair something?
HVAC maintenance, by far. It really tends to become just filter changes, and from our history of dealing with multiple rooftop systems, separate systems, it all comes down to, if you're changing your filters and you're keeping this thing up to date, it will last longer. And so in a majority of leases, the landlord puts that expense. Now, they can take on that expense and do it, but then it comes through and is a charged part of common area maintenance, which is charged back to the tenant. But in a lot of instances, this is just the tenant's responsibility to change out their own filters.
That's an interesting thing you just said. I want to follow up on a couple things. So my experience in the last several years is that most landlords, and we'll get into these lease types, but when they have a triple net lease, for instance, the default lease, the form lease you get from the landlord, actually has the tenant taking most, if not all, responsibility for even replacing HVAC. Is that what you're seeing too?
I see that. I see that in fewer leases than most. Most is maintenance up to a certain amount, maybe a couple thousand per year, something like that. Anything above and beyond that would be on the landlord. That typically allows for your typical quarterly maintenance, that kind of thing.
Now, to follow that up, let's talk about the lease types, because there's like two main types of lease a tenant might be able to get into. One's a gross and one's a triple net, right?
Right.
Explain the difference of the two.
A gross lease means that your operating expenses for the building, whether that's snow removal, landscape, garbage, that is not being passed through as an additional charge to the tenant. A gross lease includes your base rent and those expenses. It's all inclusive. It's one number. It honestly makes it a little clearer and easier for tenants to understand. Your triple net lease refers to, the triple net is real estate taxes, common area maintenance or operating expenses, and insurance. So in those leases, the base rent is separate from the operating expenses of that property, including real estate tax and insurance.
But regardless of whether it's a gross lease or a triple net lease, the numbers the landlord is calculating factors in what it costs the landlord to operate and maintain that building, correct?
Correct.
So you're paying it one way or the other.
Right.
Even when you're not replacing the HVAC, you are eventually, right?
Right. Should be built in. Triple net does provide landlords and building owners a better sense of value in terms of what market value their building sits at, because they can just see where their base rents lie and where their expenses outside of that lie.
So, I mean, I think our people are understanding the information that you possess around this. And it's, I mean, I encourage anyone, if they're interested in learning about commercial real estate, they should really reach out to you and get more of an in-depth knowledge about this. I want to get into the way your business operates with your family. But before I do that, I have one final question for you about commercial real estate. We've talked about, the purchasing. We've talked about leasing. What about investing? Because you do investing in commercial real estate as well, right?
We do. So we will help clients invest in properties, find cash flow properties, vacant properties, something that they can invest in and move forward with them. So we will advise throughout that process and represent them as a buyer. First and foremost, we probably do that the most. Alternatively, we also gather and find investments that we will invest alongside clients and find office buildings, industrial buildings, retail buildings that make sense, or we can make sense of it through a development to create value there. So we've done all of it, and we've bought and sold properties for ourselves as well.
Now, when you are looking to invest in real estate, what are you looking for?
Value creation.
Explain that.
Buy low, sell high, right? We want to buy a building below value or undervalued, because whether it's vacant, whether it's just not priced right, we see if we see the demand of the market, and we understand that we can put a tenant in there or replace a tenant that is going to pay market rents, that creates more value, more income for the property. And so we're looking for value creation there.
So I think you explained this, but when you talk about value creation, you're looking at a price that you think you can increase.
Correct.
In the short term, not in the long term, really, right?
Short term would be great, but owning property is a long-term investment.
Okay.
Right.
So in your horizon, when you say long-term investment, you look at a property that's enticing to you. You see a way you can increase the value. What's your horizon for that property typically?
Well, on a property, we will typically underwrite 5 years to, from purchase from acquisition to improvement to, leasing it, ultimately to cash flowing it, establishing, distributions on the property back to the investors. And then at the end of that, we're taking a look at where's our value right now. What's the price of this asset that we've purchased compared to what our costs are into it, and then evaluating what the return is. So looking at an internal rate of return, just like you would market investments, and seeing if it makes sense to hold it, to cash flow it, and what's the future hold for the value of that building. So we're looking out 5 years at a time, 5 to 10 years at a time.
And when you talk about value creation, I think you mentioned, maybe a build out, there might be finding new tenants, leases. What are the ways, explain a little bit of that, but what are the additional ways beyond those that you can add value to a building that you find enticing?
For us, we deal with so many build outs and construction projects that our clients, that we are facilitating for our clients, whether that's using a general contractor to go in and build, or just organizing it and doing and subbing it out individually as a property management company that is handling that solution. We've gotten pretty good at making relationships within this Fox Valley area with vendors that we know and trust. And so we tend to understand those costs. So when we're looking at projects, whether that's an investment or development, I think we go into it with some education and knowledge of what it's going to cost, and understand that this is a project that we can handle and is going to be underwritten appropriately.
And I think probably one of the best ways to increase value in a building is to get the right tenant in, right?
Yeah.
And it's not just the I mean it is a little bit, but it's not just the rate of rent the tenant's paying. What other things do you look for in leasing to a tenant?
We look for the right fit. We look just as a bank looks at their guarantors on a loan. We look at what's the financial viability of this tenant that's going to operate this business, right? And so, yeah, it does come down to business plan, their knowledge, their product. Is their product good? But we'll also look at their financial viability to sustain and really create this business.
What's your favorite business that you have been able to help, start?
I I mean, it's all. I love manufacturing. I love seeing small manufacturing start and grow and sell and build. Right, that's a fun process. So I love seeing these retail establishments do really well, and and we've seen some down economic times, right? So we started Corcoran Commercial Real Estate in 08, 09. This is during the recession and a financial crisis because of the mortgage finances that were difficult. And we saw and helped opened up retail businesses during that time that, I mean, not a lot of people are spending money, but we were able to place tenants that did well, and it makes us proud to see their success.
And making it through the hard times, I think it makes you that much better when the times turn.
Right, right.
What's the hardest business to place?
Food and beverage. Food and beverage is difficult. Your build out is expensive. Kitchens are expensive. It's a lot of plumbing. It's a lot of electric. It's a lot of equipment. And then your food product has to be good. As time has gone on, we've got more and more options beyond just Applebee's and Chili's here, right? But that's what makes one of the our community so great is we now have we're a little bit of a restaurant mecca in the sense that we've got great options to go and eat. As you look at other suburbs out there and suburban areas, I think that the Fox Valley has come around in that sense.
Now, before we go on to how the business of Corcoran Commercial Real Estate and complex management looks and your involvement of the family, one last thing about the leasing when you're placing tenants. Is there a difference between getting a tenant that might have a 3-year lease versus a tenant that might have a 10 or a 20-year lease?
Yeah, a 3-year lease is there's less value on that, right? So if we're looking at a property and the underwriting associated with it and placing a value on that property, that lease term of 3 years is somewhat short. And you can never count. I mean, there may be options within the lease, but on a 3-year lease, the right perspective is to think, well, they can leave after 3 years. That income is now gone. So when you're underwriting a property that has a lease with good, with market rents, and it's long term and it's in place, I mean that provides lease value, right? So Whole Foods coming into downtown St. Charles signing a lease for 20, I don't know what exactly what it is, but 20 plus years. It's good for the community. It's a good investment for the building owner. And so we like to see long-term leases.
Final lease question. Other than responsibility for maintenance, do you think that the biggest thing tenants get most unnerved about are the fact that their rent escalates every year?
Yeah.
So explain that.
So I think costs go up every year, right? And so the best way to look at this is every year costs go up. The consumer price index sits at 2 to 3 to 4%. It just all depends on where you live and where it is in the country. In our market, we've seen 3% as a standard. And what happens there is you've got a base rent of this monthly amount, and next year it's going to be 3% higher, and the next year 3% higher. And what that is it's adjusting for inflation. Tenants don't like it. They'd love to see one monthly rent for all 10 years. But that can't happen, because at the end of the day, that'll leave the landlord in a bad situation. They also see, when it's a triple net lease, they also see their real estate taxes going up. They see the cost to cut the grass, the cost to remove snow. That always goes up. And so these increases are, it's difficult to conceptualize when you sign this lease, but it's best to understand it, just because it is a reality.
Well, I think the huge difference between someone coming into a commercial real estate situation the first time, and that usually is going to be in a leasing situation, it's probably not going to be in a purchase situation, is that when you own your own home, your mortgage payment's set for 30 years.
Right.
Your landscaping company doesn't often increase your mowing charges every year, right?
Right.
Those types of things. So then to experience this from a commercial setting where, these things are going to go up year after year after year, there's some confusion there, some concern, some angst.
Right. And those values can get reset, right? Upon the lease termination, you want to stay, and you can negotiate with your building owner just to say, this base rent is too high, it's higher than market. We need, in order for us to stay, we need to back that down. But it is a negotiation process each and every time.
All right, I keep saying we're going to get onto this next thing, but Katie's going to indulge me and give me one more question, because I want to get some good. I promise. It's going to be a multi-part one, though, because I'm an attorney and I can't stop with one. So for the people out there listening, and they're wondering, okay, what's it cost to rent a good office space in St. Charles or Geneva? Let's say on a triple net basis, what are they looking at a price per square foot generally?
Generally speaking, and there's different product type throughout the market, right? So you've got newer property tends to be more expensive. Older property tends to be less expensive, and it just depends on the type of condition, how long it's vacant, how nice is it, right? On an average within the Fox Valley community, you're looking anywhere from $10 triple net to, let's just say, $16 triple net, right? But here's the thing: is you're looking at so many different product types, whether that's medical, we're talking about a very expensive build out, a lot of plumbing, a lot of rooms, a lot of construction. That ramps up the cost. That needs to be reflected in a higher rent typically. Then again, you could have a very basic open office floor plan, very simple. Your rent can be cheaper. So your rents vary from project to project. If you're looking at a newer project, it's a First Street, your rent is going to be higher than most of the market. It's new, it's been built recently. Construction costs are higher than everything else. So,
all right, now we're going to transition.
So I'm super interested to hear about your experience with First Street and how you were involved and all the things that you got to do with that.
So I was brought in, I would say, it was after the first building was constructed. Now, First Street, to provide some history here, I grew up in Elburn, but we still went to the Blue Goose, right? And they would help my mom load the groceries. Not that I was an ungrateful kid, but like they would help mom load the groceries into the car. It was a very local community grocery store. You had Gunther's. It was the only place to really get a suit and tie for your wedding events or for church.
Is this back in the 1900s?
This was in the 80s and 90s. So back First Street, the creation really started early mid 2000s. So buildings go up, and the development talk started in 04-ish. And they put it up at the time I was working at the self-storage business. The building goes up. It was a very interesting scenario because you're purchasing a lot of parcels of land, and the city is helping do this, right? The city is using something called eminent domain, which is a very touchy subject because it's a public entity coming in and helping force a sale, not force a sale, but they get market value, but they have to sell their property and or move it. So they bought Blue Goose, moved them, and built a new building across the way, right?
So where was Blue Goose before?
On the river, where Alter Brewing is. where the Sterling Bank is. That was where Blue Goose was. The Manor was a breakfast restaurant right at the corner of First Street and 64. I mean, there was Save the Manor signs. It was, it was a whole thing. And different developers vying for the project to go and develop it. So the First Street Partnership was formed, and they took the project. And it was sky's the limit. It was a $100 million project that was going to be all completed and done and within a year or two. So the first building goes up in 2007, 2008. It's going great. There was another leasing company in place. The development was managing it, and then the financial crisis hits. So timing was very bad. So needless to say, the rest of the pad sites that would have been ready to develop they kind of sat there. Projected rents were probably 40% less than what was underwritten. Anyhow, at about that time, that's when I was approached to come in and manage the project from property management standpoint, asset management, helping these developers and investors make decisions on what to do, where to go, and then ultimately they brought us in to place the tenants too, because we were bringing businesses to the vacancies that in a very difficult economic time that people didn't want to grow and expand and open and take risk, right? So throughout that time, we helped them, and we did the books. And it really kind of was what is at a standstill. People didn't know what was going to happen with the rest of this development until ALE Solutions was the trigger. They needed office space. They needed newer, bigger office space. So they were the first building on the site across the street to build in the whole area from a new development standpoint. It was like a hallelujah moment to know that, hey, we may be getting past this mortgage crisis. It was a great time to borrow money because interest rates were as compressed as they could be to stimulate the economy. So the First Street Partnership ended up selling them the top 4 floors, and they own the first floor retail. And then we placed tenants within there, and that snowballed into the next building, which is Sterling Bank, and then the next building, which was what we know as like Alter Brewing, where they're at. So it's been a 20-some year process, and I'm sure that the developers and the investors in the project would have liked to seen this move a little faster, and there was some turnover within the partnership. But Bob Rasmussen has always been the lead developer within that. And, he always did what he said he was going to do. And there were some partners that came and went, others that came in, believed in the project, and helped see it through. So they sold that First Street project to a larger retail office group, national company, a couple of years ago. And we were still retained to manage and lease the project for them. So we still are involved in helping place and retain tenants.
So along First Street, though, there's still been some development that continues, right? So there was a building, like an apartment building,
Yep.
too, right next to Blue Goose. Was that part of the partnership?
That was part of the original. That was part of the development of where it would go. That has been built. Everything on the river has been built. The parcel that was at First Street and Route 64, where you've got the walk and the plaza area, that was supposed to be a building. Everybody was afraid to go there, and for good reason. There was just, where do you park? How does it become convenient? And, the expense of putting this building up, how do we really attract a tenant that can actually pay the rents that would support the project? So that ended up becoming the city's project of creating the walkway, the pergola, a great hangout area, and it's just kind of become its own great hangout spot for the downtown community.
And that was kind of aided by the COVID
It was.
situation, right? So you've got COVID pushing everyone to eat outside on the patio in the summertime, which has remained and is wonderful.
Yep.
And then it was just a kind of a natural flow, I think, to keep that open area into a plaza and for the city to develop it.
Right. And it's become a gathering point for people to come and hang out, be outside during good weather. Now we have winter, so it does become difficult on these restaurants during that time.
Shh, don't remind us.
Yeah, well, but so we're in the spring and summer, and it looks great outside. Yeah, COVID definitely forced people outside, and for the few restaurants that had the lease in place, they've taken the risk. They do pay the higher rent. They had great access to outdoor space. Not everybody was okay with that because they want that outdoor space, but they didn't have the leases. They weren't taking the risk to go do this. So it was definitely beneficial to the First Street tenants there.
Do you ever have any complaints with prospective tenants, building owners, or anything about cutting off First Street from accessing 64 from a driving perspective?
No, it's really kind of nice not to have that light coming in and the traffic coming in, and ultimately, the First Street project does have great visibility, and people can come and park. I mean, there's a huge one of the buildings is a floor of retail, a floor of office, and then all parking garage, and it's public parking, right? So it is very convenient, and people do get to know what is down there.
Do you think, and this is an interesting development perspective, on the weekends and the evenings, also like Friday, Saturday, but during the weekends, parking gets a little tight?
It does.
Is there any thought, any talk in St. Charles or in the downtown area, to your knowledge, about putting in any additional parking?
With the development of the Whole Foods building, that parking lot that is public there was going to be another building, Building 6, and it was going to be 2 floors, retail and office, and no further parking. I think ultimately, from a downtown parking perspective, people are used to having convenience, parking right in front of their storefront and walking in, but this is a downtown. And ultimately, you've got 600 and some parking spaces in the Plaza building, which is a lot. And so for that thing to fill up just means there's a lot of people down there, and you got to figure out where to go. It's okay. I think the city of St. Charles has ultimately done a great job of providing public parking. And it's not, they don't charge. They don't charge anybody. This is all free public parking.
I think I would agree. I think there are some days where it's really hard to find a spot in one of those garages, but it's far and few between. It's usually a festival, a parade, something like that.
Right.
And then you also feel that the city is alive. And I think that lends to the sense that it's a thriving community.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. And if you don't want to be down there during those times, you can go with the off times and pull right up to the front of the building, which is my preference as well.
So on the other end of First Street right now, there's some construction going on. Are you involved in that?
Yes. So we just put together an investment group that purchased the CIBC bank building, which used to be the private bank. So you've got a building that's right next to Giamia. The bank that we had purchased this building from is now taking out the drive-through because that was part of a license agreement between the bank and the city. And so they're taking out the drive-through. Our plan is to remake the outside of this building, kind of update it, make it look nice, and we've got it on the market for lease. And honestly, it's set up as a bank. It is office space right now. We're open to a variety of tenants, whether that's retail or office, and it's just going to bring people downtown. It's gonna add to the look and feel of downtown. So we're excited about that. At the same time, we've also presented the last parcel as part of the First Street development is Building 8, which is right next to the Helix, the circle ramp, as on the Plaza building at the corner of Illinois and Route 31. And Bob Rasmussen is leading this again, so he's looking to complete a 20-some year project, which will be a nice little apartment building that is just gonna It looks fantastic. Great place to live. You've got a beautiful grocery store right across the way, and it'll be nice to finally put this entire development where it's done and complete and finished.
That's awesome. I want to transition now a little bit. So, as we alluded to early on, you and I share something in common, and that is we work with our family, right?
Right.
So, tell our people, as we are now calling them, our people, how is your business structured? How does your family fit in? Where does everyone work? What are their roles?
Yeah, it's a blessing to have family in the office, right? So, my wife and I see each other, morning, noon, night, at all times. So she's in the building. She's at the opposite end of the building, which can help sometimes. But I honestly, we get along. We get along great, and she's very good at what she does. She's the ultimate organizer and just helps manage the office. My partner in commercial real estate and the management company, Ryan Samuelson, is my brother-in-law. I hit the jackpot with Ryan. He married my sister just years after we got married 20 years ago. So, Ryan and I share an office. We have desks in the same office. We will sit there day in and day out, throwing ideas off back and forth between how do we respond to this tenant, how do we respond to this landlord, how do we negotiate this. Sometimes we're even on the opposite ends of negotiation. He represents this group, I represent this group. We try and create a Chinese wall between the two and do a really good job of working together. Now we also hang out, on the weekends and family events and that type of thing. But our office has just a great vibe. Everybody that works there, all of our employees, which there's a total of 9 of us, we all just have a blast day in, day out. And mind you, we're managing properties, so that means we're dealing with other people's headaches, and we still have a gas doing it. So, like I said, it's a blessing to work with everybody.
Well, luckily though, and I agree, your office runs great. I mean, you've invited me over for some events and everything. They're all wonderful people. You have come up with a system to tell which Ryan is who, though, right?
Right.
So you get to retain the name Ryan, but Sammy's called Sammy, correct?
Ryan Samuelson is Sammy.
Which is
correct.
confusing at first, because when someone introduces him as Sammy, you're like, "Hey, Sam, how's it going?" And no, it's Sammy.
Which he responds to just fine, right? But I mean, 2 Ryans, and it's always one of us picking up the other's client or just answering the phone for each other. So we do make that designation, but yeah, it's worked out well.
You say sitting in the office. You actually have standing desks, don't you?
Right. Yes.
So I could never get on board with this concept. I'm a little too lazy, I think. I like to sit down and pontificate about my great thoughts, but you guys all stand all day.
We stand, we write on the desks. It's like a dry erase board. We take notes on there. We can walk around, putt, we putt in the office. We talk on the phone at the same time. It's great. It's active.
Now, on your business, you say you got 9 employees. How many buildings do you manage?
Oh, well, it becomes difficult because we manage like industrial parks where there's a couple hundred buildings, right? We're somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 million square feet under management. We manage, full-time multi-tenant buildings, maybe 45 to 50 at any given point. And that continues to grow as the organization does.
And it's your management strictly commercial, no residential.
The only residential that we have is where it's mixed use, right? So there's an association that typically will have retail or office on the first floor, and then there's residences above.
Okay. Now, we talked about the leasing and the purchasing and the selling. I think, there's another way that our businesses are similar, and that is there's really no upfront costs most of the time to our clients, right?
Right.
Explain that.
Well, if you're buying or selling a property, our advice really comes free. At the end of the day, the trigger for how we get paid is the transaction of the buying or the sale of the building. So we could go out for years on end looking to find the right building, and if it never makes a fit, we're not charging people to go and advise and look at buildings and tour and walk through or anything like that. From a leasing standpoint, everything, we are with a client all the way through that lease transaction until the lease is signed, and typically in this scenario, the landlord pays a commission associated with the lease.
And he's modest because he helps even after the lease is signed. He's always there answering questions and helping with build out. I mean, he's not swinging hammers, but he's answering questions, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so you said, so on the lease side, it's the commission, and it's similarly a commission on the sale price on a purchase or a sale, right?
Right.
What about on the property management side? Is there a set fee, or is it how does that work?
Yeah, it can be looked at, and there's nothing standard about it. But it can be looked at in a variety of ways: a percentage of rents, a percentage of net or gross rent. It can, and typically that can range anywhere from 2.5 to 6% of rent. Are we making financial and asset level decisions? So are we handling banks? Are we handling leasing decisions? That can be another level of asset management over property management. We can look at it on a per square foot basis. We're always looking. Okay, what are we putting into this project on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? How many meetings do we expect to have to put these board meetings together, the agendas together, listen to all the cooks in the kitchen talk about everything that they want, and wrangle everybody together to make decisions on property. And so all those factors play into how we decide and determine fees.
So it's very similar to how we do it on the injury side, where we really don't get paid until the deal's done. In other words, like our clients collect money, but in your situation, it's sort of like collecting money. The someone signed on the dotted line and there's a transaction done, right?
Correct.
Now, if someone wants to come to you and seek out your advice about how to sell a building, how to buy a building, how to lease, what should they expect that process to look like?
Pointed questions, right? So gotten to the point where I'd like to understand what they're thinking. I need to understand what they're anticipating spending. What is their business? What are their financials? And so these are all pointed questions. Some people are not ready to answer yet. Some people aren't ready to say what their business plan is. And ultimately, these are things that we need to know in order to serve the client properly.
Once you come to a decision that this is a good fit, that you're going to be able to help someone, is there a contract someone has to sign? Is it just like a handshake? How does that look?
A representation agreement. So exclusive agency representation agreement, whether that's we're representing your building, we're representing you as a tenant, we're representing you as a buyer. So we typically like to put that in place, and we establish agency for that client.
As you're sitting here now, we're at the end of May of 2026. What's the best part in your mind about what you get to do on a day-to-day basis?
Dealing with such variety of companies, right? So we go anywhere from putting a sandwich company into a little space, but they make great sandwiches, all the way to helping a manufacturer locate and purchase a 50,000 square foot building in a very difficult and high demand, low supply market. But we've gone and found that for them and provided their avenue to growth, right? So the most fun thing is to see the success stories of other people.
What's the converse there? What's the worst thing? The thing you dislike the most about your job on a day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month?
I would say, and I don't want to say, property management is difficult. in terms of you are dealing with difficult situations. And so whether that's somebody not paying rent, you have to make that phone call and find out what the struggle is. And you're talking about these are businesses that they run, right? And so this is personal to them, and it's not exactly something that people like to talk about. But you got to figure out what's going on and why it's going on. That is a difficult thing to do. I don't have a problem doing it, and I just try and maintain open communication, right? And if you avoid these type of things, it's just not good for your client. It's not good for the tenant or the landlord. So communication it's a big part of it, and you can't just email somebody to do it and just steer clear of it. You do have to dive in.
I think that's the hardest part of most professional businesses. It's the time where you got to like pull your pants up, put your boots on, and make that hard call. Don't you agree, Katie?
I think so. I think the hardest part is when someone is in a tough spot and you might not be able to fix it for them.
Right.
It's amazing when you can fix it for them, or you can give them the answers. But there are times where we don't have that option.
Right. It's true.
We're at that point of our podcast where we're going to do some rapid fire questions about the Fox Valley with Ryan. All right. So I'll go first. I'm going to start it off. Ryan, as an iconic venue within St. Charles, is there anything better than the Arcada?
No, having the Arcada downtown is amazing for our community and for different organizations to come and use, see, and visit.
Besides the Arcada, what's the most sought after attraction, venue, whatever in St. Charles?
Well, recently it's become Whole Foods. What a great grocery store. I also need to take out a loan to go shop there, but it is a fantastic place to be, and I think it's been successful.
Favorite restaurant in the Tri-Cities?
Zaza's.
Ooh.
Which I've been to Zaza's with both of you, and sitting out on the patio, having great food. Dino runs a great business. Love it.
Hidden gem in Geneva.
In Geneva, I would say Ella's is one of my favorites, and that's not exactly a hidden gem, but what is their smash burger. They have great pizzas. What is that? Detroit-style pizzas, and it's like a focaccia bread. It's insane. It's really good. But it could also be ranked as like the best smash burger I've ever had.
So we go to Ella's all the time because it's 3 doors down from
Yeah,
the office,
yeah.
and I've never tried their smash burger.
I have. It's good. Yeah, 100%. I agree.
Yeah.
Favorite thing to do on the weekends?
You know, I end up traveling on the weekends a lot, whether that's for the kids' sports or, going somewhere with the family. I love to play golf around here. There's golf options. Anything to do with sports-related activities. If I could be on a bike riding up and down the river on the paths, that would be fantastic for me.
So, Ryan, I know you're a member at Royal Fox, and I'm at St. Charles, of course, so we've got that little rivalry, but we play each other quite a bit, including those two courses.
For real tournaments and made-up tournaments.
That's right.
I have one this weekend, but nevertheless.
It's not
You have one
real.
this afternoon.
I do.
That one's real.
Yeah. Is it?
Maybe.
Here's one for the golf aficionados out there. Favorite golf hole in the Fox Valley?
Is it number 8, that par 3 at your course that has the creek running through it?
It's 9.
It's 9. Sorry. Thank you. It's 9. That hole is fantastic.
Yeah, and so for our viewers, you have to understand, St. Charles Country Club was originally built and started where the old Accenture Q Center is now.
Arthur Anderson.
Arthur
Right.
Anderson Q Center is now, and when Arthur Anderson built the Q Center, what is now the Q Center, the country club course there shifted and went more north. They also had some northern property which you called the quarry holes, And so most of the 17 holes in St. Charles Country Club are classic, back-to-back fairways country club. But that hole 9, the reason I think everyone likes it so much is that it's part of the quarry course, really. And it's got that totally different new vibe, and it's got a beautiful stream running through it. It's hard as the dickens.
It is. Elevated tee box onto a lower green with a stream running right next to it is beautiful.
And if you hit right, you're going to lose your ball every time, and you don't want to go into the weeds.
That's right.
Well, you pretty much can't hit anywhere left or right. It's got to be high and straight. I wasn't going to do this, but I'll throw it in there. What's the newest thing in your bag this year that you're liking?
Wow. Sarah, this was a surprise for her. I saw these, what are they? They're called oil can finish by Titleist. They're like copper looking, and it's a oil can finish Titleist T100 iron that looked amazing. I just wanted to go see what it hit like, so I did a club fitting over at Cantigny, and I loved it. And I said, "Yes, can I please have a set of those?"
So did you get what? Did you get a 3-iron through pitching wedge, or did you modify it a little?
I got a 4-iron through pitching wedge. Yeah.
All right.
So this goes along with Sarah. It wins the award for best wife.
Correct. See, it's always better to say yes.
100%.
Great job.
All right. So final question, and this is not really rapid fire, but going back to real estate. So we always talk to people, and we talked to Ryan Bongard about this in episode 2. We have formulated this podcast as a Fox Valley podcast, St. Charles, Geneva, Batavia. And, us from not being from around the area, we see the community as one community. You're from the area. Do you see them as individual communities or separate?
Well, we like to joke back and forth, right? Geneva, we say it's Geneva, but our house is within walking distance to the Geneva High School, right? It would have been great if my kids could have walked to high school from St. Charles over to Geneva, but I look at it all as one community. We have a great Fox Valley, and I love to see these downtowns thrive, right? We manage a majority of the buildings on 3rd Street in Geneva. We manage the River Street buildings in downtown Batavia. And it has just been a pleasure to place and manage these buildings and make improvements to these places and downtowns that people know and love and come to visit.
Would you agree that if someone's coming in to buy a building or to lease, to start a business, they view this as one community as opposed to 3 separate towns?
They do. There does tend to be a difference in between the arterial roads of Route 38, Route 64. It's a lot of traffic, and traffic ends up being, feeding the businesses, that kind of thing. So, but these downtowns are very similar in the sense of the type of businesses that'll go in there.
So with the arterial roads like 38 and 64 coming through Geneva and St. Charles, is it easier to place businesses?
A little bit.
There as opposed to Batavia?
A little bit. But Batavia has better geography. I mean, I would say that Batavia is geographically it's flatter. You've got better bike paths that are throughout that downtown. It's beautiful, and I think and I believe that Batavia is going to see great development down there forthcoming.
I would think Batavia would be advantageous with respect to proximity to the interstate.
Yes.
Okay, final question on real estate, and then we're going to wrap this up and get you out of here to your match. But we asked this of Ryan Bongard in episode 2. Any talk, any knowledge, anything you've heard about data centers coming to the Tri-Cities?
Yeah, we manage Batavia Industrial Park, where a data center is coming to our park, and I think Batavia has been receptive. There was always a question of electric pull and how much water do they use, how much water do they recycle to cool these. But the engines of these server farms and data centers that come in my view, ultimately it is a boon to whoever is getting those tax dollars. That is a very expensive building to build. the value of that building is astronomical, and it only adds to the basis and reduces everybody else's taxes within the area.
I also think there's some advantageous aspects of a data center versus a like Amazon warehouse, for instance, because you're not tearing up roads,
Right.
with heavy trucks in and out of a data center. But there are some problems with data centers. So what were some of the challenges that you saw putting that data center there, if any?
Well, I mean, and there's only one that's coming into our Fox Valley right now, but you need redundant power and you need heavy power. And so we don't have a lot of that, and so we're not going to see a ton of it. But when you look, in the tri-state area, hey, you have to be able to pull electricity that's not, and it has to be there. So, the utilities and how they're thinking about this it's very intelligent the way that they're going about it, but the locations are strategic.
If there was a community member or someone living at or near like one of these data centers in their area, what would you tell them about some maybe things they might have wrong about data centers or right?
I would just say that your taxes are reduced at the end of the day because of this building, and it's they're such minimal impact locally that I think it's nothing but a good thing.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, I really appreciate you being here today with us. It's been a great episode, episode 3. We just swung through. We kept you longer than we wanted to, but I appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So if any of our people want to get a hold of you, want to contact you, want to learn more about what you do or take advantage of some of the opportunities you have with real estate, how do they get a hold of you?
Just go Google Corcoran Commercial Real Estate. We're downtown St. Charles, and we respond.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for showing up for our 3rd episode. We really appreciate it. Katie and I are super excited to bring you episode 4 here coming very shortly. We're very excited to have one of our good friends on there. You're going to like what she has to say. We look forward to that. We'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.